Yeah, so what we're talking about today is the how we integrate cloud security and cloud cost with these services with ITSM, and I think Cody's gone over some of this as far as the TrueSight orchestration piece with you guys. So what I'll do is I'll hopefully connect the dots and show you basically how it works. So the first thing that you want to set up is a TrueSight orchestration connector. So I'm going to go over here to the Manage Connectors screen, and you'll see I've got a connector here. I'm calling it BMC Helix ITSM, but it's a TSO connector. And this connector is an on-premise connector. It runs from within your environment, but it just needs to be able to communicate, obviously, with cloud security, in this case, as well as your TSO instance. And so all the connection parameters that you set up for this connector really specify how to communicate with your TSO workflow instance. So I've already done that. It's running. It's running on my TSO VM, in fact, in my environment that's supporting this demo. So there's my connector. You know what? Let me just go ahead and show you some of the settings real quick while we're here for completeness. So like I said, this is a string. This is the URL for communicating with TSO, the port it's going to communicate on, who I'm authenticating as, the password, and then the grid name, where your adapters and modules are running, what grid they're running on in this TSO instance. So those are my settings. That's really all there is to it. And once you configure that, the connector is then downloaded, and like I said, you can run it from wherever you like, as long as there's connectivity between cloud security, the internet basically, and then your TSO instance. So that's step one. Step two is to configure notifications, and the notifications are also here in the toolbox. So we'll go to notifications, and for our purposes, I've created two notifications, one for incident and one for change. So let's just take a quick look at these. And the reason you need the connector first is because without having the connector, you can't configure the notification. So for the incident, we just give it a name. It can be anything. I've named mine. What the ITSM instance I'm talking to, in this case, Helix ITSM 1908 to be exact, which was released in August. This is for incident. I'm telling this notification that for any violations that occur on a particular connector or AWS account, in this case, I've got an AWS account. I'm also calling BMC Helix. For any violations that occur on this account, I want to create an incident. So this will run, I've got it to set monthly, but you could run it daily if you like. Any incidents that come in, it will trigger this TSO connector. That's why the connector is important. And this workflow, within that connector, this workflow that's built into TSO. And then when we create an incident, we have ways to group them by. So we can group them by like resource type. For example, I want all my S3 buckets or Elasticsearches to go in one incident, for example. Or we could say I want to group them by policy. I want anything that fails the CIS policy for Elasticsearch or the CIS AWS benchmark to be grouped in a particular incident. So that's the notification for incident. And because it's a scheduled notification, I can also run it on demand. And I'll show you in a second. I've already done that as well. And then the second notification is for change integration. So again, you just give it a unique name. I'm saying for remediations in this case that happen on this connector, on this particular connector, and these type of remediations, I could say any remediation on demand or manual remediations or auto remediations. These are event driven. I'm just doing on demand in this case. I want to trigger I want to call this TSO instance, and again, we're going to execute this workflow for change, and when we're going to execute this workflow when when the remediation is done. So because this happens when you trigger a remediation, it's not a scheduled sort of notification. So let me pause there, Robert, and see if there's any, or Cody, or anybody else for that matter, and see if there's any questions at this point.
So the incident notification occurs whenever there is a alert detected?
Right.
Or
correct.
Okay.
When you can set it up so that as soon as the violation is detected, an incident will be created.
Okay. And then the change.
The change in my case, when I trigger a change, when I trigger a remediation, it's going to trigger a change request that's going to require approval before the remediation can occur. And again, that can also be event-driven, so that as soon as if you are automatically remediating a violation, the change request can be triggered, and it can go through some sort of automated approval process, and then the remediation will complete. Does that make sense? Hopefully?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, okay, so those are the pieces. Without getting into the actual workflows, those are the key pieces to make the ITSM integration work. Let me show you. So if I switch within my dashboard and I go to my connector that I specified in my incident, which is this connector here, and I'm going to filter down to a particular policy, I've got an Elasticsearch in here that is non-compliant because it's wide open to the public, this ES domain. And here's the details about that domain, where it lives, the policy that it's violating, the rule that it's violating. And what I wanted to show you here is that when I ran when this violation was detected and the incident notification was run, it generated this incident ticket. So I've got an incident ticket here, 6814, and if I switch over to my Helix environment, here's my incident console in Helix ITSM 1908 version, and if I look at this incident here, it's associated with that particular Elasticsearch. So here are details about the Elasticsearch, the policy that it's violating, and so on. So I've got an incident that tracked that particular violation that happened. Okay? So far, so
Can
good?
we send the tickets to a different ticketing system?
Yes. Yeah, so the workflow, when you get into the workflow, you can configure it for whatever the type of ITSM system you're talking to.
Okay, but out of TrueSight Cloud Security, it can only go to the Helix ticket system?
No. So back up.
Yeah.
In the notification,
Mm-hmm.
in the notification, when you specify the connector you want, there's my connector that I'm talking to TSO with. This is the workflow I want to trigger. So this workflow could be
I see. Okay.
ServiceNow or whatever you're using for your ITSM environment.
Okay, so it's sending it to Orchestrator, which is talking to the ticketing system.
Yes.
And then how does the ticket number come back?
So that's handled through the adapters and modules to monitor when the ticket gets generated and fed back into cloud security.
Okay.
So basically, we're monitoring the ITSM environment for the ticket and then pass that back to cloud security. And if you need more details than that, we'll have to dive into the workflow.
I think at this point we can just move on.
Yeah. So we can talk to other ITSM environments as needed. In this case, it's Helix, like we said. Okay, so back to my let's go to the resources. There's my Elasticsearch. This could be any type of resource, that's got a violation.
Mm-hmm.
So now I've enabled this rule for remediation, and there's a remediation associated with the policy. So I can click the rule and hit remediate. Now, because I've integrated this change notification, it knows that it's triggered a change request. And so this remediation will basically sit there until the change request is approved or completed. So it's going to sit there and wait. And so I'll switch over to my ITSM instance. And if I switch consoles, now I want to go from the incident console, I want to switch over to my change tickets. So there's my change request that was generated again through the change notification and the TSO connector. We triggered the workflow. It passed all the data in about the violation that's being remediated, and that's what you're seeing here in this change request. So you get details about the resource, the policy, who's remediating it, and so on is in the change request. Now, in my case, my change approval process here is not automated. I actually just need to move it through a couple states to get it to a scheduled state so that the remediation triggers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move this manually from draft to the next state, which is request for change, and I'm going to hit save. And this could be an automated approval. It could be whatever is required for your particular environment. And I needed to move it to one more state to get it scheduled. So I'm going to take it from request for change, move it one more step to scheduled, and hit save. Now, in my environment, that says when it's scheduled, the remediation can go ahead and do its thing, do its work. So I'm going to refresh this. And it says implementation in progress. That means that the remediation is actually working. In this case, we're closing down or closing access to the Elasticsearch service in AWS. And if I hit refresh again, hopefully it's done. Yep. So then now the change request is closed. So this all happened automatically. Once we moved the change to the right state and effectively approved it, the implementation triggered, it did its thing, and then the change was automatically closed so that this doesn't require manual intervention unless you want it to. So there's my change, it's closed, all done. Now if I switch back to cloud security and I refresh this page, okay, I've got a failed message here for some reason, but I'll have to look into that. It should have remediated. But anyhow, I've got a change request here now, which syncs up with the change in Helix ITSM. But I'll have to see what happened here. But generally, this would have worked, and then the ES would be closed and now compliant. So that's effectively it. What questions do you have at this point?
The remediation action, I'm sorry, is that built into cloud security, or is that a different workflow in Orchestrator?
In this case, the remediation is baked into the policy. So the policies that we have out of the box have remediation in them. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that you couldn't trigger a workflow as part of your remediation activity. you could certainly do that. But in this case, the remediation is built in.
Yeah. And then when the remediation, or sorry, when the incident was detected and the ticket was created, is there a way to make it build that ticket directly in the scheduled state? Or do we have to go through the manual approval processes?
No, not at all. That's completely configurable. It's based on your processes on your side.
Okay, so the workflow that builds the ticket would set it up that way.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Tony. When AO sets that, or when TSO sets that ticket up, it sends it into your default remedy automations that you've already got set up. So if you've got some custom workflows out of the box there, it'll just follow those.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, and those same workflows are going to likely be the ones that you're going to use for not only this, but change automation with like server automation as well. So once you get that process built where it does the ticket creation and pulls back the ticket ID and then, waits for it to close and gets approved and stuff like that, all of that stuff's reusable, so you don't have to have a bunch of one-offs normally. So.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the piece here I showed you here, yeah, don't be confused by that. It's just that's how it's set up in this environment. This is really modeled after your processes, how you want it to work for violations of this sort in your environment.
And then when you make the change to the in the ticketing system to scheduled, what then talks back to the cloud security to enact the remediation?
So that's built into the workflows as well, the details of the workflow. So when the change is approved, it basically tells the workflow to tell cloud security, okay, go ahead and complete these remediation steps that were baked into the policy.
So there will need to be some reach back from our whatever ServiceNow or Service Desk or whoever we're using into Orchestrator.
Yeah, so normally how that works is there'll be two different connectors that get set up. One is an actor, which actually goes and performs actions in your ITSM, and one is a
Monitor.
Monitor. That's right. Yeah, I was going to say listening, but I know that wasn't it. Monitor that actually will do something like watch for a user's queue or something like that, and pull it and wait for something to come into the queue. And most ITSM solutions have a way to do alerts and things like that when something comes into a certain queue. So as long as that functionality is there, you have the two-way communication. So ServiceNow has that. Most of the ones that we've integrated with in the past have had that functionality. It's just a matter of setting it up. So we provide the content for, I think, Remedy, BMC Remedy, and ServiceNow, but we can expand that to pretty much any ITSM system as long as there's the API access or a way to be able to talk into it with an automated fashion. So. Yeah,
Cody, I was assuming some of that you had covered some of that before. Do you want me to? I can pull up the TrueSight orchestration in my environment up if it would help.
That's something you want to see, Robert? Do you want to actually see how kind of what the workflow looks like? We can also cover it too in a separate one if you want, because it can get kind of deep. That's where services is going to probably be a big help. One of the things that we talked around with services enablement is having them help you guys get your ITSM integration in place as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, you and me went through the Orchestrator demo previously. It may benefit the others that haven't seen everything yet. But quickly, it says remediation failed right there.
Yeah, I'm not sure, honestly. It was a live demo. I'm not sure what happened. I need to look into why that failed.
Yeah, not a live demo if it works right?
Exactly. So, but yes, I apologize for that. This normally would have completed. You'd see completed here.
Is there any sort of details as to, so the remediation failed, the ticketing system, does it know that the remediation failed?
Well, it's still in a scheduled state. You see that it didn't complete here on
Yeah.
this side. So I need to look into exactly what happened in this case. Might have more details here, yeah.
Not authorized to perform. Okay, so it does give you some details as to what happened.
Yes, yeah. So I've got a permissions issue, it looks like, when I'm trying to remediate it. And like I said, this is a fresh environment. It's not my normal demo environment, so it's kind of good I found it before next week.
But yeah.
What Cody was saying was exactly right. So in TSO itself, we have this notion of adapters that we have tons of adapters that we use for communicating with different systems like BMC systems as well as others like ServiceNow.
Mhm.
And then we have monitoring adapters that listen for events coming back. And then we have modules, so adapters and modules. Modules are the piece that communicate with these adapters both in and out of these systems. So.
Okay. Can we get a quick walkthrough of just the general dashboard, what policies look like for people who haven't seen this before?
The security dashboard?
Sure.
Cody, I don't know what's been discussed. You want me to just run through how I normally discuss this, or how do you want?
Yeah, if you just want to give like a 5-minute overview of, I think what Robert's trying to get to is, since he's going to send this to some of his team members anyways, might as well add a little bit of additional benefit to the end of it. So.
Sure. Do you want to drive?
5 minutes. You could probably walk through it real quick. I know we're running short on time, and just kind of explain the dashboard and show maybe what the policy engine looks like.
Okay, so you want me to do that, right? Just to be clear.
If you don't mind, yeah.
Yeah. So when you first log into cloud security, you're presented with this dashboard here, and the idea is that it gives you an overall compliance status across all of your public cloud environments as well as your containerized environments, things like that, all in one dashboard, so you can see how you're doing in terms of your compliance and against different policies as well as best practices. So the way it works is we pull in this total resource number is the total number of resources across all the environments you're looking at. So think resources as, like we just showed before, Elasticsearch services, S3 buckets, network security groups, Azure subscriptions, EC2 instances, things like that. Those are what we're talking about when we're talking resources. So these resources come in through our concept of connectors. We have connectors for talking to different public cloud environments as well as Docker environments and Docker clustered environments like Kubernetes. But so in this case, I've got 2 AWS connectors, and these are talking to 2 AWS accounts. And I say that because you could have like one AWS master account with several child accounts. So we could have a connector that effectively talks to literally hundreds of sub-accounts if you want. I've also got a connector here for Azure. So the power here is that once we scan in these resources, we analyze them against policies, and the policies are mapped to the connectors. In other words, what policies do you care about when the connector runs? What policies do you want to analyze the data against that you care about in your environment? For example, you might not care about policies for PCI compliance, but you do about GDPR or what have you. But anyhow, policies are here. These are the policies I have mapped to my connectors that I've analyzed this data against in this particular demo. So you can see we've got different benchmarks. These are based on Center for Internet Security Standards, PCI, and so on, as well as some BMC best practice policies here. And so I can see at a glance, I've got some 1,800 resources across my AWS and Azure environments. 1,100, 1,200 of them are non-compliant based on those policies. 64% and 36% are. On the right, we can see how this is a new environment, so I'm not trending very well, but you can see how you're making progress with compliance in your public cloud environments, for example. Across the bottom, we get a bit more detail. We break these policies down into rules. So each policy may have a number of rules in them, and so we can say, that's why the number's bigger here, how many rules are being violated, and also, more importantly, what the level of severity is on those rules. Like we've got 35 are critical, which is concerning. We can also look at the age of resources. If you've got resources that have been sitting out there that are not compliant for a number of days, that might get your attention as well. And then again, on the right, we can tell how many remediations we're triggering. Because these can be automated, it's good to know how you're doing on your remediation activity to fix these things. But the real power here in the dashboard, and I know we're running out of time, the real power here, like I showed earlier, is to find something quickly. So if you're interested in, like I said, I've got, let's just pick this one, AWS. I'm interested in this particular AWS connector or a particular account. Within that connector, if there's multiple accounts, and I'm interested in, hey, let's pick a different one here. Let's say S3 buckets. Do I have any S3 buckets that are non-compliant? Well, I can find that data really, really quickly by filtering down. I've got 53 S3 buckets here, so I can also look, say, well, I want only the ones that are critical. So I've got 4. I can drill down further, either look at these 53 that are non-compliant or the 4 that are critical. So I could click here and go right to those buckets. I've got 2 rules that are concerning for 2 different policies. So I'll just pick this one. And this will take me right to the S3 buckets that are failing that critical rule or that policy and that rule that's critical, and these could be remediated. So that's just a quick rundown, and I know we're out of time, Cody. Anything else I missed?
No, I think that was probably beneficial. I think that'll give the team a gist of the use of the tool, being able to identify and remediate based on policies. So I appreciate that.
Okay.
I know that we're out of time, and like I said, unfortunately, I have a conflict. Robert, do you have anything else?
No, I think that'll be sufficient to get everyone familiar with what the tool overall is and generally how it's going to work. Obviously, as we go forward the next several weeks, it'll be a lot more deep dives and getting all the details, nitty-gritty details ironed out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, like I said, we did plan for services engagements too. So you guys will have resources that are in the know to help you, implement it and come up with things like planning and policies and procedures around how we tie this into that. So, so I thank you everybody for your time. I thank Robert for joining, Tony and Rick. Thank you for going through that. I'll send out this recording once I get it saved to my computer. Upload it.
Do you want to send that to me, and then I'll watermark some times for the team?
Sure. Yeah, that would be perfect. So yeah.
All right. Great.
I'll send it over to you probably before the end of the day.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it. Bye.
See y'all.